And then eventually the doctors found out that my heart was just completely stopping and I flatlined at the hospital for 26 seconds. And they said there was nothing. There was no pulse at all. Sometimes it's kind of hard to discern what is my own thinking and what is not, right? But I know often when it's not something I was even thinking about or would even ever think about, it's like, okay, obviously that is very much like a psychic hit because I wasn't thinking about that at all. It just randomly popped in my head.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Andrea Harsch with us. We're going to talk about her life experience, what happened, and dig into some spirituality. So thank you so much, Andrea, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always start the conversation with everybody, and I try to kind of just go back a little bit. And I know you've had some experiences in your life, so we'll dig in as to when those moments happened. But
Mhm.
if we can think about a moment in your life when the real shift happened into becoming more spiritual, we'll say, if there
Mhm.
was a moment like that, and if we can go from there and go backwards, so we go
Oh.
from who you were as a child up until that moment, what was your life like?
My parents were religious in terms of believing in God, but we weren't really a family that went to church. And growing up, I definitely felt energy around me. I remember always being very curious and trying to see things because I could just feel that something else was there. But also, as a very little girl, I would hear things at night. It's always at night, but even now it's worse at night. And I'm sure a lot of people that are pretty spiritual will understand that because it's like your mind starts to quiet, it starts to relax, and that's when we can start hearing the other side better or just like our own intuitive thoughts because instead like when in the day we're just so busy in our mind thinking do this, do that, and whatever you're in the middle of processing versus at night you're trying to just kind of blank out and then it gives space for spirit to step in. And so at night as a little girl I would hear things. I would hear voices. I would hear like creaking noises that were just abnormal. I would hear like the typewriter going off in the office. And I remember I'd like peek in there. Nobody was there. I would never see anything. Sometimes I would see little things like floating around. It was very strange. And every time I'd tell my parents, they would just tell me, go back to bed. There's nothing there. And then usually lock the door. And then
Right.
I'm just laying in bed, freaked out, thinking, oh my gosh, no, like I can feel it. I know. And I tell people it's like when you're standing somewhere and somebody walks up to you and they're standing behind you, you can feel
Mm,
it. Like you could
yes.
have your eyes closed and somebody can walk up to you and you're going to be like, what? Or you're asleep, right? And I mean, you're a dad. If you're asleep and your kid comes up and they're standing next to you, like you wake up because you feel them standing there. And it's kind
Yeah.
of the same thing. And so I felt those energies as a child. And then kind of I wanted it to be more and I wanted to understand it more and see more. And it never turned into more. And so then I just kept on with life. And towards my teenage years, I started feeling pretty depressed and I didn't know why. Even actually as a young child, I felt kind of depressed. I didn't understand. I was very overwhelmed with a lot of things. And I think I now look back and I know I'm such an empath. And so I take on my own emotions, but I take on everybody else's as well. And so I feel more than my own. And it's a lot as a child. And then that continued to happen. So then in my teenage years, I was very suicidal, very depressed, and just battling through all of that. And I remember I would lay in bed praying at night to not wake up because I just thought, if there is a God, you'll let me not wake up. Like, no way would you want people to live in this type of pain. This is no way to live. But I kept living. And so then I was about 17 when I started having these episodes where I would pass out. And then as time went on, I would pass out for longer periods. And then eventually the doctors found out that my heart was just completely stopping and I flatlined at the hospital for 26 seconds. And they said there was nothing. There was no pulse at all. And luckily, my heart just started up on its own and I came back. But that's when I had to get a pacemaker put in to keep my heart beating because I was constantly having these episodes where my heart would just try to stop.
Mm.
And 3 months later, after getting the pacemaker, the wire came loose and it went through my heart into my lung. And I was bleeding out. They had no idea what was happening. And I mean, this is a pretty long story, but I talk about it a little bit on my own show that I'm going to release soon. But they didn't know what was going on. They just knew I was full of blood in my lungs. And then eventually they figured it out. And then they told me, I may or may not make it through the surgery. They told me the surgery would go one of two ways. They said, we're going to pull this wire out, and either the hole is just going to close up and you'll be fine, or we're going to pull it out and your heart's just going to start bleeding out. And then we're going to cut your chest open. We're going to perform open heart surgery and try to save you. And
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot of people think, oh my gosh, how scary. But when you're that far down the path of almost being gone, it's almost like you can't be scared. It's
Mhm.
it's too late to be scared. It's like it's time for just like gratitude for what you've had and telling the people you love that you love them and just really hoping for the best outcome. And I also remember going into surgery thinking about how they often talk about people that drink and drive. If they get into an accident, they often will survive more than the passenger that's sober because their body was so relaxed going into it from being drunk, essentially.
Yeah.
And
I've heard of that. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I remember thinking about that, and I remember thinking, okay, it must be really important that I don't go into this anxious and I keep
Right.
my body relaxed and calm. And so I tried to stay as calm as I could. And I went into the surgery and they did not have to cut me open. They just went in and pulled the wire out and everything closed up beautifully and it worked out well. And I went on my merry way. And then I continued to have various health problems throughout the years. But with all these problems, I started to reflect and start asking all these why questions. Like, why is this happening? Explain this to me. You have to figure out like why there's a reason for everything. And so when you look at why something is happening, then you can understand your path more, right? Like you look at why did God make that happen to me? What was the purpose of all that? And you can start to find purpose and meaning in your life. No matter how difficult something is, you can look at it and figure out the why. There's always a why to everything, even the most tragic of things.
Hmm.
There's a reason. There's always a reason. And sometimes it's hard to figure out, right? But we do figure those things out. And so going through so much tragedy did start to spiritually awaken me and make me see that life is quick to come and quick to go. And with that, I started realizing like it's okay to start questioning things and looking beyond what I physically see because so many people are against spirituality in the sense of like seeing angels and seeing spirits and all of that, right? And I just thought life is too short. I'm just going to be open to anything and everything. And I believe in God and I believe in his protection. And so I just went with that. I believed that I would be protected, but I would still be able to be open to all those things. And as we were talking about earlier, I've always felt within me that the pain that I went through and felt as a little girl was not for no reason at all. It was for the greater good. And I believe that I have the strength now to help others because not everybody finds that strength. And I've always been such an empath and so sensitive to other people's feelings and needs. And I don't want anybody to feel the way that I have felt, but they will. And I want to be that person to give people hope. And so my thing that I'm doing now is really just trying to focus on spreading messages that help people have hope and faith that there will be a time that they will live life differently, and helping people to understand that we make choices and our choices will impact us so greatly. And it's even choices, it's not just choices of our actions, it's choices of our thoughts,
Right.
because every thought creates a chemical reaction within our body. And some people want to live in this pity party state where it's like, well, you don't have to deal with this and you don't have to deal with this. So you don't understand, you don't understand. And well, that's a choice. If that's a perspective you want to have, that's a choice. Of course, I don't understand every person's thing, right? And nobody understands every single person's situation because those are their shoes that they're walking through. But I can tell you, I've gone through a lot of things that were not easy to deal with. I've also gotten ulcerative colitis and Lyme disease, and then they thought I had MS. And then it was to the point where they thought I had ALS because I couldn't even walk. And when I say I couldn't walk, it was like my husband would carry me up the stairs because I could not make it up the stairs. Could I get out of bed and walk to the bathroom? Yeah, I could do that much. Um, could I get down the stairs in the morning? Sometimes, like I could hang on the rail. It was easier to go down. It just depended. So, like if I wanted to go long distances, that's when I would just go in a wheelchair. And there's not even any pictures of this because it was something I was so ashamed of.
Mhm.
And I don't want to say I don't know why. It's like, it was so unreal what was happening to me. I think I almost felt like it was almost made up. And you get to this point too where you have so many problems happening within your body that it's like, and doctors can't figure it out either. So you're like, oh my God, am I crazy? Am I making this up? And I think I kind of felt that way. And so, but I also knew I couldn't really actually walk. Like I couldn't walk miles and miles upon miles. So I knew if I wanted to do what I wanted to do, that was how I was going to do it, was in a wheelchair. Even my bachelorette party, I was in a wheelchair at Disneyland. That's where I wanted to go.
Wow.
Happiest place on earth. I couldn't walk that much. That's a lot of walking.
Hmm.
Um, but through all this, I've learned that we can change we can change the outcome. We can stop what's happening to us. I mean, because it got to the point where the doctors told me it looked like I had ALS because they started doing all this testing and they're like, well, we can see. I remember them doing some weird test on my neck and my muscles weren't responding. And they're like, well, it's not, your muscles aren't responding, but we don't even know why. And they couldn't figure out why any of this was happening. And so it was to the point where they thought, okay, you just have ALS and that's just that. And so they asked me if I wanted to like continue with more testing. And it's like, for what? Like, so I just started doing my own research. And that's when I started finding a connection with Lyme and all that. And so I got treated for Lyme and eventually started walking. So that's a whole long story. I can't even go all the way back into it, but all these little things led up to me having this understanding that we have to ask why something is happening so that we can get through it.
Hmm.
Don't just whine about it. Don't just have a pity party about it. Like you
Yeah.
have to start asking why. Because when I was 21 and flatlining and getting a pacemaker, it's like I had to ask why. I'm 21 years old getting a pacemaker. Like, why? That's crazy. Like, why is this happening? Because this is not something that happens to everybody. And I think that's where I really realized to ask why was because of the uniqueness. It wasn't something typical, right? If it was something typical, oh, the flu bug, like I'm not gonna ask myself why I got the flu. Everybody gets the flu, no big deal. But
Hmm.
not everybody gets a pacemaker, especially at that age. And
Yeah.
so at that age, it was like, why? Why is this happening? And even looking back on all the things, right? Like, why was I depressed? Why? Like, you have to ask why to come to these answers. So when your world is not going the way you want it, ask yourself why. Ask yourself what part you're playing in it because you are playing a part in it. So many people don't want to take that ownership.
Hmm.
And if you don't, well, you're probably going to stay stuck.
When you were going through it as a because you said, going back a second, you said when you were a kid, you grew up, you felt energy and all these things, but then you moved into more of a depressing state, a depressed state into your teen years, right?
Hmm.
And now here you are talking about asking questions like the why, right?
Hmm.
Have you had to sit with ever in your own mind and say to yourself, why was I depressed?
Yes, and I know why.
Okay. So you know why.
I
So you
do.
know the why of that now, but at the time, did you know the why?
No,
Okay.
100% did not.
Okay. So that's something that you worked out later on.
Yeah.
Okay. And that I was curious about
Well,
it because you said you're depressed. And a lot of times what happens, and then I think to myself, okay, this is the first time I've met you, but I'm thinking to myself, here's this little girl and she turns into a teenager and she's depressed and she starts becoming suicidal and or those kind of tendencies, those thoughts.
mhm,
And then all of a sudden you develop this illness, right?
mhm.
I'm not saying we're all here creating our own illnesses. I don't want to say that. That's a very sensitive topic, a very sensitive thing to say. But
It
what
certainly perpetuates the problem.
that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if, if we go down that road, if that almost allows our bodies to attack itself, it almost like brings out more
100%.
stress, more because these things you were mentioning, like ulcerative colitis, all these things,
Mhm.
and some of them even sounded autoimmune kind of thing that was
Yes.
going on. And at some point, you decided um, that you weren't going to keep going that route, and then you discovered you had Lyme. I'm not sure how you discovered that, or if that was just the disease that decided to be the thing that you had to heal. It could have been any of them, right? It could have been, but that Lyme came through somehow, right? You got that somehow. Some people might say, well, Lyme disease, it's not you creating that, it's from this. I don't know much about Lyme. I had a someone on that had to heal that over time.
Mhm.
But I guess where I'm trying to go with this is because you're saying to ask the question of why. And have you gotten to a point now where when you have something coming up, you go right to that, you go right to the why so that you can try to heal from within?
I would say my immediate response is not that because I'm a human and that we live in an animal state in our
Right.
brains.
Right.
And that's the first place we go. So I've had to I did get certified in brain rewiring. So I it's like my first place isn't that, to be honest. It's not. And then it's like, okay, hello, Andrea. Like, you know what to do, you know to step back, you know you got to rewire and figure this out. So no, not immediately,
Mhm.
but pretty shortly after, yes, I know that. And I'm still battling some things, and when I feel stress, I feel it too much, and
Mhm.
that's just me.
I
Like
think
it's
that's the world of being an empath. Unfortunately, I have
Mhm,
the same thing. You know what I mean? The reason I was asking that question is because you're gonna have a lot of people listening in, and there might be people who are battling things and they're wanting to heal. They want to feel good, right?
mhm,
And I'm just, one guest after another comes on and will say to start, like kind of what you said, asking those questions. What kind of
mhm.
energy are you putting yourself around? How are you feeling every day? Who are the people you're around? Um, because things start to kind of they can get worse, right? I'm not saying we're all going to walk around and heal ourselves miraculously of everything we get but I kind of believe in magic a little bit too, to be honest.
Yeah,
I do kind of see it like I think there's the physical world and then I was just speaking with someone recently who talked about how we have an energy body, we have a physical body, we have an emotional body. And if they're not in alignment, we're in big trouble. And so if we're only focusing on just the physical and we think everything is just physical, we're fighting a battle that is hard to win. And
yeah.
that's kind of where I'm going with this. I didn't know if you felt the same way.
I do, and when you're saying all that, it brings up something that I always try to explain to people, which is that you have to look at your life and look at yourself and then think of all the people that you surround yourself with. Like, everybody that you kind of interact with on, let's say, weekly basis, like the people that are in your life frequently. And sometimes it really helps to write it out, but like put all these people down, put yourself in the middle on the paper, put all these people down around you, and then write down. all the things about them, like the energies that you think that they have, right? Like if they're moody, if they're anxious, if they're mean, if they're angry, if they're happy, if they're kind, like all the things and the energies that they hold, and then look at the whole paper because that's also you.
Mm,
Like that's you, right? It's like that whole mirror idea too. But those are also all the energies you're surrounding yourself with. Like we can't deny it that we feel very differently when we enter different rooms. I always use the example of a funeral. Like you walk into a funeral, you don't really feel ready to party. Like
mm,
you immediately feel exhausted and drained because that's just how everybody in that room is feeling, and that energy, it seeps into you. And
mm,
so it's just different, right? You walk into a nightclub, you're feeling a little pumped up, and it's not just the music, it's just everybody's screaming and everybody's, got their heart rates up and jumping around and
yeah.
everybody's excited, and it's a different space. And so you can choose that space that you hold for your own personal life, right? So
Hmm.
you choose these people that you're going to surround yourself with. And I feel like as I say that, I can hear people saying like, well, I got my sister this or my aunt or my mother-in-law, whatever. Like I feel like people will argue that they have certain people in their lives that are toxic and they just don't have a choice. And I mean, we do have a choice.
Right.
We do.
Yeah.
Um,
We definitely have a choice, and we have a choice of how much we want to interact with them, how much,
mhm,
you still love your family and love friends or people that have been in your life, but how much you don't have to do everything to constantly please everybody, because
right.
then it can turn into some unhealthy places. And I think you're right, like putting yourself around the right people, that's important. So you had this experience wait, sorry, was it 17 that you had yeah, you started passing out at 17, and then you're 21, you're having a pacemaker. Then you
Mm-hmm.
had the incident, and you had this, and you flatlined.
Hmm.
But as I recall us talking about, you don't recall experiencing anything during that moment. Um, some people I talk to later on in life remember things. It's almost like it goes online at like age 55 or 65, and they're like, "Oh wow, that actually happened." But did you come out of it feeling it at all different, or was it the same as you always felt?
No, I would not say I came out the same. I came out. Um, this is hard. This is hard to really put into words. That's Nobody's ever actually asked it in that way, and I know exactly what you mean. And it's because I feel like when you ask it that way, it's not just like, oh, what did you learn from that day? It's like, who were you, right? Like, who were
Right.
you after that day? And
Yes.
I wasn't the same person. I think with that happening, like I said, with the depression I had faced and all that before, it was like I had a whole new perspective on that, and a little bit of, I think, shame for even like feeling that, because it was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I actually just died and could have not come back. And now I'm so glad. But I also like started going through so much shortly after that with other health things. But in that moment, so when I came to, I couldn't even see. So when, I mean, I'm sure a lot of your guests talk about this, but when you die, like you lose oxygen to your brain. So when you come back, you can't see. I mean, I'm assuming most people can't see. Uh, If you don't have oxygen to your brain, you lose your sight. And so,
Right.
and that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, I started putting two and two together from all the past events where I had flatline. So the one happened in the hospital and it was a recorded episode. But prior to that, I was by myself often, or some people would be around me, but I never knew exactly how long it was. But what I realized was the length of the time that I was gone was very much correlated with my vision. So sometimes I would come back and be able to see right away. And then sometimes it would take quite a while for the vision to come back. And that's because the less oxygen you have to your brain, or like the longer the period is that you don't have the oxygen to your brain, the longer it's going to take for your vision and everything to come back. And so that's what was happening. But I gained so many perspectives with all the little things like that. So it's like I came out of that thinking, oh my gosh, like what will life be like without vision?
Mm,
And like, and wow, how quick you can lose something so valuable, your vision. It's so valuable. And it was just such a perspective shift for me to look at everybody so differently. And then it even like as I went on with the ulcerative colitis and I was super sick and out of the hospital, I remember there was a time where I wanted to leave the house so bad. I hadn't left in weeks because I had been at home on meds trying to get things under control and finally left the house with my mom to go to Home Depot. I was so excited. I'm like, I'm leaving the house. And I couldn't walk through the whole store. So I just went and sat down by a magazine rack. And this guy came over to me because I think he wanted to get by me for something. And he's like, he said something like, really, you're just going to sit and park it right there in the way or something like that. And it was just like, from that day forward, I have always been very quick to ask myself when somebody does something nasty to me, I'm like, what are they going through?
hmm.
That's that's my first thought is like, what are they going through? Not you. Sorry, I don't know if we can
Right.
say that on here, but
That's fine. That's fine.
it's it's really like, what are you going through? Like,
Mhm.
I actually had this guy completely run me off the freeway, completely, all the way off the freeway.
Wow.
And I look over at him, he had no clue he did it. He never even realized, never realized. And I called the company because he was in a company truck. And I told him, I said, I don't know what this guy's going through. Like, I don't know if his wife just found out she has cancer or like something's going on, but he is not paying attention to his driving. Like, he just ran me off the road. And I do have enough self-awareness to know that that's not normal or that's not the norm of people's thinking. A lot of people would be like, that jerk, blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Mhm.
most people don't want to be a jerk. They really don't. Like, we
Yeah.
do things sometimes that are not the kindest because we're somewhere else in our heads because something else is going on in our lives. And so I feel like it's really important for people to realize there's probably something going on with somebody when they're doing something. I mean, yeah, some people are just like constantly making bad choices, but
Right.
sometimes there's stuff going on. So I often ask myself, why are they doing that? How did they get here? Even for the people
Mhm.
that do make bad choices all the time, it's like, why? Why are you doing that to people? Like, what happened to you as a little girl or a little boy that makes you want to treat people that way? So,
So it sounds like you already had a heightened awareness before because you were aware of energy and things like that because you talked about that when you were a child. But then after the close call with death, near death experience, you had this close call. Um, your awareness of people around you became even more heightened, it seems. So you're
mhm,
more aware of I'm gonna, because I think as a human, the hardest part is we react very quickly a lot of times, right? Driving is a perfect example. I like how you used it because someone will be riding behind you, and sometimes a reaction might be to pull over and whatever you're gonna do. But and then the longer it goes on, then maybe you think, okay, what's going on? I'm just gonna be in my space, in my lane. They're going through something. But because usually people aren't even getting mad that they're going to get hurt. Because you could get hurt if someone slams in you. They're more mad like, why are you doing that to me? There's an offensive that we get offended, and we have a reaction right away. So learning to not react so quickly and to just kind of maybe move to the side, let the person go, and just move on with your day, right? And you have that more of awareness, it seems like. Maybe because you look at life a little more delicately,
mhm.
because of how close you've come a few times.
Yeah,
And could that be what it is?
I totally think so, and I
Yeah.
I think, though, it's also, like, we take it personally, right? I mean, I don't anymore, but I think that's often why people react that way, like you're saying, some people, they get mad, but it's because they're taking it personally.
Mhm.
Like, it's a personal attack that somebody cut you off. They don't even know you. They
Right.
just don't know how to drive, you know? Like,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So often it's that feeling of a personal attack, but then that's, where you ask yourself, like, why do I feel like somebody is trying to personally attack me? Like, why am I having these feelings? And
Mhm.
that's a whole deep dive.
Well, the ideology that we're all one comes up a lot, right? When I'm talking to
Yes.
a lot of ND near-death experiences, they go to the afterlife, have these experiences, and they come back with the realization that I'm you, you're me. I mean, it starts to really get trippy when people start talking about this stuff, you know what I'm saying? Um, but if you really think about it, let's just pretend for a moment that that's true, because maybe we don't know that. But if it is true, then it means when we're getting angry and we're getting frustrated with someone, we're getting frustrated with ourselves, getting
Hmm.
frustrated with the whole, right? Because we're living this separate life here. And I understand we're all separate. But if you look at everybody like beautiful souls, no matter what they do, and I know it's very hard to do sometimes with certain people, you get a different perspective on what's going on. And again, like you said, you don't know what's going on with that person. Maybe that person was tortured their entire childhood,
Hmm.
and now they're just trying to get through the day.
Hmm.
And they're not targeting you, they're targeting whatever's in their way.
Hmm.
And that happens. And I know it can be like we get offended by that, but that is one of the probably the hardest things to do is to forgive and allow people to just kind of not affect you. Because not only that, going back to the energy thing, their energy will affect you. Right.
Hmm.
So are you going to take it? You're going to get angry and then you're going to come home. You're going to tell everybody. I always look at it. I deal with a lot of people every day and I'm always like, hey, what the way that I react or act towards people that I'm dealing with is going to be a ripple, right? They're going to then leave here and go home and tell their spouse, tell their mother, whoever they're seeing, how their day went, how their vocal lesson went, whatever it is that I'm doing. And it's going to affect them. If it was a great experience, that they can now give that over. It's like, and I see it all the time. It like I've had people come in or I'll talk to someone and they're just going, going, going. And I put up kind of this like loving shield. And they either look at me at a point as if, oh, okay, I'm getting annoyed with myself and I gotta stop, and they calm down. Or sometimes I feel like they are taking in the love and they're like, okay. And that you'll see the shift. Like I've played with this. I've played
Yeah.
with this and then I see them change and I go, oh, that works. Like it's like a little
Yeah.
secret. Like, okay, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm gonna just give them love. It's like that's a lot of negativity. I'm just gonna shear them with love. And then by
Yeah.
the end of the hour you talk to them, you go, wow, it was great.
Yeah.
So it is energy too, right? So I think that that's the case. I was gonna say you came back. When did you start thinking you were going to start using your gifts? Because you said that you're a psychic medium and you kind of tune into people's energy now. Was this long after these incidences were happening? Like when did that happen?
Yeah. I probably about 10 years after it was quite a while after. Um, I had gone to this one medium and I told her, well, actually, so I asked her about a few people that were visiting me and she confirmed what I was seeing, but then she brought up somebody like a past it was like one of my dad's best friends, but brought him up and he's like and she said, "Oh, and he says he talks to you because you can hear him." And I was like, "Oh, yeah." Like, I hadn't told anybody that
Mm,
because I thought I was crazy. And years prior, my when my grandfather had passed, it was the same thing. I could hear him all the time, like, all the time, to the point where I was like, "You've got to stop, grandpa. I feel crazy. Like, just stop. I feel crazy. I feel crazy. I think I'm losing it. Like, you've got to stop. You've got to stop." And so it did. And then when she told me that, I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe I'm not crazy because I had not told her. I had not told anyone. So it's not like anyone else had told her." And then, a lot of the different things came up with her talking about how I was going to be the face of something one day. And we talked about this briefly too beforehand. But then I've seen other psychic mediums. My friends and I like to do that sometimes where we just go and do it for fun. Same thing. It always comes up. You're going to be the face of something. I see you as something big one day. And it's like, well, what is it? What is it? And so I'm finally figuring that out. But through all this, it was like, okay, this stuff is real. Like, they know things from the other side that obviously I know. So it's real. The other side is real. And so that's when I think it was during COVID when I got a little bored and took a class. This was an angel card reading class I took and started doing this class on how to do angel card readings. And I remember telling the teacher, I was like, I'm seeing all these things, I'm hearing all these things. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, that happens when you have other gifts, they start to come up. And so I had all these other gifts start surfacing and a lot of like psychic insights. Like I would tell my husband things before they would happen. And I mean, it's been cool because he'd probably think I was like totally crazy if I didn't give him all these predictions that came true, or like
Right.
I've told him about people that have passed that he knew that I didn't know. And he's like, how did you know that? He's like, okay, no, she's legit. She really knows this stuff. But so I did that. And then I just saw that I had all these gifts. And so I just kind of kept taking different classes and trying to train my skills and hone them in. And here we are where I have all these different gifts, but I've tried to figure out the why. Like, why do I have these gifts, right? Like,
Mhm.
I know they're meant to be for some sort of purpose. And I think it's kind of like you, where you said, like, you just intuitively guide yourself with these conversations and you just know where to go with them. And I think it's going to be the same where the
Mhm.
show that I'm about to start, I've recorded a few episodes, but I always just set that intention before I start the episode that I'm just going to be guided and it will go as it's meant to go for the greater good. And I believe that's where all of that comes in. And even the spirit stuff for
Mhm.
past loved ones. I'm sure there's going to be episodes and times where people may pop in for a little visit and that may become part of the episode. I have no idea. Um, but I just know that I am extremely divinely guided and I'm meant to help people. So I think all of this is happening so that I can make a big impact because I think we are in such a place where people are trying so hard to just survive
Mhm.
in so many ways. In so
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah, sometimes I look at it like souls have come down. Like I just saw this vision in my head. Souls have come down to the earth and they're down there. We're down here. And for some reason, in this time, a whole bunch of the lights have turned on. And the lights represent the gifts coming online because I do believe people are now turning them on a little bit quicker than in our past, whereas
Mhm,
before we would suppress those. And now
mhm.
we're just turning them on. A perfect example for me today, I went and got a massage done this afternoon. And I pulled up to my massage. And I pulled into the lane to the lane where I was going in. And I went, is it today? Is it today? Am I sure it's today? It can't be today. And I pulled up my phone. I looked up. I'm like, yeah, it's today. It's at this time. I'm like, something's wrong. I'm not supposed to be here. And I was like, no, no, this is right. And I checked my calendar again. I'm like, yeah, no, it's today. It's this time. Okay, I'm good. Grab my water. I go in. My massage therapist looks right at me and goes, oh my God, I double booked. You're not, I have someone else coming. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, hey, I'm not supposed to be here. I already knew that.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, you stay. I'm going to go talk to the other person. And then she figured it out. We both got like a half hour instead of an hour. At the end of the day, this is so the old me would have looked at that and said, oh, what a coincidence. What a
Yeah.
coincidence that I thought that and went in and had that moment. Now I chuckle. I go, I was sitting there waiting while she was talking to the next person and thinking, yeah, I already knew. I already knew that there was this disconnect. There was this, I was picking up on the energy.
Mhm,
And those are little things that I do all the time now, and it's increasing. And some people might listen to it and think, oh, he's, okay, whatever. But I know because I started to actually pay more attention. So if you're
mhm,
paying attention, then you start to see these things. And I really do truly believe everybody can feel. And I was always feeling. I never actually But I think even today it was more of a feel. I think I've always been more in the feeling aspect than I don't see things. You mentioned that you heard, did you hear like audible voices? Is that what you've heard? Like it's in your head, or what does it sound like?
I People always ask me that, like, what does it sound like? What does it look like? And it's all in my head, except sometimes things are very much like in the room. But I typically don't see like people running around in the room and see them around me. I That's not typical, but
Mhm.
sometimes yes, I do. Um, but what I hear, it's like it's in my head. It's so hard to explain because it's clear, but it's in my head. Like I know it's not an outside noise. I know it's a voice in my head. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's kind of hard to discern what is my own thinking and what is not, right? But I know often when it's not something I was even thinking about or would even ever think about, it's like, okay, obviously that is very much like a psychic hit because I wasn't thinking about that at all. It just randomly popped in my head. So
And have you had them come to you a number of times? It keeps coming to me and I have to say it because I keep getting the same thing.
what do you mean?
So you said you'll be sitting there, like you could be sitting there right now, and you get a random thought coming
Hmm.
from my energy. Something
Hmm.
comes through, and you
Hmm.
go, okay, why did I think that? I'm not gonna. But then it hits again, and you go, okay, this must mean something. Does that happen? Or are you at a point now where you can hear something, and be like, that's not my thought, I'm gonna say it? Do you feel
Yeah,
confident
no,
enough to
I
do
would
that
say
now?
it's usually pretty strong. And, sometimes if it's a physical thing with somebody, I'll just be like, is your throat hurting? Because my throat felt fine all day. And all of a sudden I'm like, ah. And then,
Right, right.
then people are like, oh yeah, it is. Because I can also like feel what's going on inside
Oh,
somebody else's body. Like,
wow.
yeah, because sometimes people are like, I'm feeling really nervous. I'm like, yeah, I know, I feel it. Calm down, please. I'm
Yeah,
like, because my heart is racing too, and it's not
yeah.
my own. That especially is easy for me to tell the difference of. Like, if my
Mhm.
heart starts like racing all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, like that is not me. And I also know like what's a typical body feeling for me. So sometimes it's like, I never feel this way. Like, this is very much you. So I feel
Okay.
it. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
And it's so you're saying it's not necessarily audible, like you don't hear it like the person when they were alive, or do
no,
you?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Like
yeah,
every,
mhm.
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say I had a friend pass about a year ago now, and in a dream, she came through the dream, and because we really just talked audible, we didn't see each other in real life. It was all audio, and in the
Mhm.
dream, she taught spoke. It was more of a feeling of I'm not supposed to be doing this, but yeah, you asked for it, so here I am. I gotta go. I'm okay. And in the dream, the her voice was so clear. It was almost like more clear than it was when I heard her here.
Yeah.
It was very clear, and I can still hear it. I can
Yeah.
still hear it when she said, "Hey." I can hear it. I say it like that because that's how she said, "Hey."
Yeah.
So there was an audible, but that was in a dream. And so
Mhm.
some people are like, oh, that's a nice dream that you had about your friend that passed. But it felt so important, you
Yeah.
know, and it can't leave me now. So I'm wondering when someone's a psychic medium, if they hear a voice, if it's like that strong, or if it can be, or if it's just a thought.
It's it's both, and every person that has passed comes to me in different ways, and it's so hard to explain, but I'll have people come through sometimes where I feel everything about their passing, like, okay, and I can explain to somebody what's happening, like, okay, I'm throwing up a lot. Oh my God, I feel really sick. I can feel myself. I'm laying in a bed. Like, and then I start asking questions like, okay, did they pass of cancer? Because I feel like I'm like really sick and it's like that throwing up, like chemo type sick. Right. And so I'll ask questions like that where so some people I will feel it and I'll just have a feeling like there's just like a sense of knowing around it. But
Mm,
then some people I will audibly hear things and sometimes I see the words like it's just written out for me. Every person just presents differently
different.
for whatever reason. I mean, I guess they have their own energy and they're their own person, they're their own soul And so they just present very differently. But it kind of reminds me of, like I was going to say, our intuition too is something I feel like, to me, our intuition is that sense of knowing, right? Where you just, you know, and you have all these things that you just know. And I really believe it comes from before we are born. I believe we are sent here with things that we are meant to figure out and know along the way. And so they're given to us. Like God imprints these things on us before we're even born. So then as we go along, your intuition is that sense of knowing from well before you were even birthed into this world. And it just starts coming up and you start like tapping into what you went into the world with. Like we come here with a knowing of our mission and our purpose, but sometimes we aren't listening to it.
Right. And I think I do believe that sometimes when we're not listening, that's when we really get wake up calls. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have had NDEs tell me that they feel now that those were wake up calls. It was, I knew exactly I was going in the wrong direction. I could feel it, but I wasn't listening. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not to scare people out there to think, but
Oh.
it's more so to say, breathe and step back
Mm-hmm.
and look at what's going on. And you look at all the things you've gone through and the different ailments. And I'm sure you're at a point now where if you get something, you don't just right away, maybe because I think it's easy for us because you said the first thing you go is more in the physical. It's like, oh, what do I have or what's going on? It's that's we're human. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
common thing. But I think the work we can do is why do I have this? What's going
Mm-hmm.
on? What do I need to figure out here? And if
Mm-hmm.
we ask those questions deep inside of us, we might actually get an answer and
Mm-hmm.
then move from there. Doesn't mean you're just going to cure yourself without going and actually talking to somebody to get help for something.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in life we need help, but it's just I do believe that we all have that in us. And if we can get more in touch with ourself, you said it perfect. And I've even said recently that I'm discovering those. So there's chatter. This is the way I'm seeing it. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not even versed in the spiritual world. This is all new to me in the last year of doing this podcast. But there's chatter in our heads. And then this is what I get at least. There's chatter, which I'm learning to try to let go of. And then there's direct. Get a direct message. And but it's calm. When I get the direct message and it's calm, I'm trying to listen to that now. It's
Yeah.
like boom, that's just what it is. And it's very like sure. Whereas
Yeah.
this gets like, ooh, this, and it's fearful and it like, that doesn't feel like, I don't think that's my abilities. That's
Yeah.
my mind, right? Is it the same thing for you that way?
Yeah. No, totally. Because that is like your natural mind when it's busy and chaotic and whatever. But like you're saying, it's like this calm, like very clear message that comes through. And to touch on what you were just saying, though, about people like not to scare you, when you said not to scare you about like if, you have this near death experience or whatever, God's trying to wake you up or you're trying or spirit's trying to steer you in a different direction, whatever you believe in. Um, it doesn't even have to be a near death experience, though, right?
Right.
Like it can just be in general, like you lose your job and people think, oh my God, my world is over. Like I needed that job. My life's a mess. Da, da, da. And it's like, it's a fork in the road and it was laid in the road on purpose. Like that job was not good for you for whatever reason. There is something better for you. And so I think people have to really trust and believe that. I feel like that brings so much comfort to me when something feels kind of difficult. I'm like, just breathe and just know there's something better. There's something better coming, right?
Mm,
There's something better. Like this is happening because I wasn't meant to be here not here physically in this world, but like I wasn't meant to be in this location at this time or whatever, right? And so for whatever reason, everything happens. And I know somebody, she shared this story one time about, and I may mess it up a little bit, but it was something like they were supposed to get on this train to go somewhere and they missed the train and they were like livid they missed this train. Well, the train ended up being, I think, derailed and all the passengers died on that train. And
wow.
so it was like one of those stories where it just reminds you to remember that everything happens for a reason. And like
Mm,
if you're hitting every red light, it's okay. Like it's probably very intentional and purposeful. You're meant to be hitting all those red lights, right? Or whatever happens. If you're running late and your kids are slowing you down to get out the door and you're later than you planned, it's like, well, you probably just were not meant to be on the road 2 minutes ago or 5 minutes
Mhm.
ago,
Yeah.
because you probably would have gotten into an accident. Or, I mean, not to always be extreme with it, but like, you're just you are where you're meant to be in every moment of every day.
Yeah.
And you just have to believe that. So with
And
all
we
the
keep
chaos,
we keep trying to control it.
yeah,
And that's what's funny. If you can look at it more like everything, I'm not saying we're being controlled, because then people
right.
get down this kind of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
fearful,
yeah,
they get into this fear of simulation and we're all being controlled and there's nothing, you still got to live your life. Like everything is, but if you look at it more like it's going in this direction and you just kind of like, you're here to just enjoy it while you're here and try not to control each piece of it, it your life becomes a lot easier and the
yeah.
stress levels aren't so high. These are the things I'm just learning now. And I'm like, I thought every time I think I have it figured out, I'm like, no, I didn't, because I'm like learning again. And that's part of being human, right? So I think what you said was beautiful though, about just, I like the example that you used. I mean, that's a terrible story. Um, but it really kind of puts it in perspective. And sometimes it's good to go to that extreme because then you think, right, okay. And what again, she was trying to control that situation. I wanted that train. That's my train. I wanted to be on it. And
Yep.
again, sometimes you just got to let it go and there's
Mhm.
going to be another train. If you
Yeah.
hit that red light, every red light, maybe just relax at every red light. You're still going to get where you're going. It's the same concept. So I'm looking at this person in front of me who's had all these close calls with death. You came out of it. You can't, I'm getting the idea you were always this way in a sense, but it looks like when COVID hit, you got into this card reading.
Mhm.
And did that propel you? Did that make you realize, oh, wow, I think I am in touch with things more than I was acknowledging before?
Oh, 100%. Because, I mean, before, I would say, like, I felt the energy, right? I mean, I felt energy like we talked about in a room, or, somebody walking up behind you. I was very sensitive to that sort of thing. But then after that, it was like, I mean, I could tell you the future on certain things. And when people ask certain things, I don't know everything. And I love that, because I really believe I'm only meant to know what I'm meant to know,
Mhm.
because I don't think I don't think it's right. Like, I love psychics. I mean, obviously, I guess I'm psychic, intuitive, whatever you want to call it, because I do know future things, but I don't know everything. And I believe we are not meant to know everything. And I think we only need to know what we need to know and what is helpful for us, and helpful for us to stay on our path and do good in this world. And so I don't walk around trying to know the future and know everything. I mean, there's certainly sometimes where I get anxious and want to just like know how everything is going to play out, and I'll
Mhm.
have a good idea, but I don't walk around reading people or trying to know everything about everybody, because some people ask, like, "Are you reading me right now?" And I'm like, "No, I'm
Right.
not." Like, that's not my place. Like, I
Yeah.
don't I don't feel like it's my place to just like tap into everybody all the time and know all the things about them. But I mean, I certainly can meet people and get a very quick energetic vibe on them, and
Mhm.
know whether I think they have good energy, bad energy, and what's going on in their lives.
Yeah. And you're willing to work with people. Like that's the thing, right? Like you
Yeah.
want to work with, if people want help, then you're willing to do it. If they're
Yeah.
not asking for your help, then you're just living your life. But like I've talked to many mediums at this point and psychics that say there are times though where I get that nudge over and over and I have to like, I feel like, do I say it? Do I not? And that comes up probably sometimes, but I like how you said that, how you're there for, like, you're pretty much there for people when they want the help with it, but
Mhm.
you're not just hanging out with your friends and like seeing everything happening in their lives and digging in. And it's kind of intrusive in a way too to do that
Mhm.
anyways. So, but
Yeah.
I will say it's the same thing as being an empath. I have people I see and I know immediately if something's off. And then I go, okay, is it my place? So usually I do like a check to proceed. I'm like, are you okay? And if it's like, yeah, I'm fine, and I know it's not, I'm like, okay, um, okay, and I'll leave it. But
Yeah.
then sometimes those moments will shift and they'll be like, actually, no, this is what's going on. I'm like, okay. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, okay, confirmed. You're right. So that's how I do it. It's different. That's just from a feeling place. I don't know if you do the same thing.
A little bit. I mean, sometimes I'll just tell people, "I just wanna give you a hug." And it's like,
Hmm.
I think they know that they're not having the best day and they just need it, and sometimes they're like, "Okay," and they just take it, and I'm like, "I don't care." Like, I'm just gonna give them a hug, and it is what it is, but
Yeah.
so to talk about things that come up that you were talking about, like, oh, hanging out with your friends. And yeah, no, I don't sit there and read into people, but sometimes I'm hanging out with friends and things start coming through about them and it just happens. And for example, I have a good friend of mine who I get a lot of stuff for her, but I think it's because she's very open to it and she loves it and she wants the information. And so I think it's very divinely known that it's an open channel. Like it's
Mm.
fine. She's comfortable. She wants the information. It's not intrusive. Like there's no block there. And so well, actually, there's like two stories around her, but one, when she was pregnant, she hadn't told anybody. And I text her and I was like, your dad came to me last night in this dream and he kept showing me it was around Christmas time. I was like, for some reason, he was showing me this nativity scene and like I don't get it. And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, like he just kept showing me like the baby Jesus in the nativity scene. And then she's like, and I was like, so nothing like about the baby? And she's like, I'm pregnant. And she's like, I hadn't told anybody. And also at that time, I had recently learned that when I see Jesus in a vision, it means there's protection around it.
Mm.
And she was very nervous about the pregnancy. And so it was just kind of funny, but it was a nativity scene. And I think it
Yeah.
was baby Jesus. And it was all that because she needed to talk to me about it. Like we
Hmm.
needed to have that conversation that everything was okay. And then flash forward, I don't know how many months, and her dad showed me him with her at the hospital going down the hallway. Like, and this is where I had to kind of feel into what it all meant, but it felt like, I mean, she hadn't had the baby and she's being pushed down the hallway. You typically aren't pushed down the hallway when you're in the hospital, right? You check in, you go into your room, you have your baby in your room.
Right.
And so I was like, I think you're going to have a C-section. And I mean,
Mm.
first, actually, I told her sister. Well, no, first I asked her, I said, how do you feel about C-sections? And she's like, oh my gosh, no, no way. So scary. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to tell her.
Right. Right.
I mean, I didn't want to scare her because what if
Right.
I'm wrong? Right. So I didn't tell her. And then I asked her sister, I told her sister, and she's like, oh no, you should tell her. I was like, okay. So I told her what I saw. I told her where her dad was. I believe it was on the right side of the bed. And I said, I see you guys headed to the OR and I think you're going to have a C-section. And so I think she was probably a little nervous about it, but it was like, okay. So she went to have her baby. And then I don't even remember all the details, but I want to say the baby's heart rate was dropping or something was happening. So then it was like, okay, we're going to have to do a C-section. We're going to take you to the OR. So they go take her down the hall, and she said there was nobody on the right side of the bed. And she remembered I had told her dad was walking with her on the right side of the bed. She said everybody was on the left.
Mm.
And so she said she actually had a lot of comfort in that moment because we had already had this conversation and she knew that like her dad was probably right there with her. And so she ended up making it to the OR and then not having to have the C-section. So that was the good news.
Was her father here or not?
Oh
He
no,
was.
he's passed.
He's passed. Okay, now
Mhm.
that story.
Sorry. Sorry.
No,
Should have
that's
led
a
with that.
that's okay. So he's passed. Yeah, well, you did kind of say that he
Sorry.
came. Yeah, he came to you in the dream though with the nativity scene. So that makes sense. So
Mhm.
so yeah, so he's on the side with her that
Mhm.
nobody is. Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible. And so she
Yeah.
didn't have the C-section, but
Not.
you
But all that
saw,
happened.
but the C-section part that you mentioned, that was your interpretation of what you were seeing. That what you didn't actually see her getting the C-section.
No.
And that's what's really interesting, right? Because you're seeing something and interpreting as, oh, that must equal that. So
Mhm.
that's probably the hard part about being a psychic medium at times is you probably get things that you're trying to interpret and you probably have to get to a point where you just say what's there and then the person will make more sense of that because it
Yeah.
makes more sense to them, right? So
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. And so
Yeah.
that all turned on more after you did the card reading stuff,
Mhm.
and then you started working in it. Do you work with people often? Like, do people? I guess I always ask how people contact, right? Because like people will watch this and wonder where, like, if you actually offer services this way, or is it just something you do? Like, I don't know how much you're
I
doing.
do, I mean, I do the services when people ask for it, but it's not my primary focus right now. I'm really trying to focus on doing the YouTube show,
Mhm.
Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn, because I feel my main mission here is to really help people have hope and help people lean into their own intuition for guidance. And I think one readings are great, but I also think I don't impact as many people that way,
Mm.
right? It's that one person. And I feel like I just feel in my soul that I am meant to impact a large amount and
Mhm.
not just a few people. And I know it's not, and it's not to say it's worthless to impact one person, right? Like it trickles down and it's a whole thing. You impact one
Right.
person, it impacts another and another and another, and that's great. But if the show can impact 100, 200, 500, 1,000, like for every 1,000, each person within that 1,000 is going to go impact another one and another, and
Right.
like the effect is just so much greater that way.
So your
So
intuition is telling you that you're wanting to do it at a level much like the Soul Inspired, where people are tuning in and they're getting um, some kind
yeah.
of droplet to take and move with, and you're affecting more people. And
Mhm,
you know what? That could just be where you're at now. It could be everything changes, right?
mhm,
But I always ask that just because I know some people will probably look at you and think that you're a great person and say, "Oh, I'd love to see what kind of what you pick up on me and those kind of things." So I'm sure you'll might hear from somebody or
mhm.
on your show. And you said it was called Soul or
Like,
Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn, you said?
mhm, yes.
Okay. And that's
Yeah,
just you're just starting to work on that.
yeah, and my
Awesome.
Instagram is Andrea Lynn Intuitive. So, and I've been a little quiet on there just because my focus has been primarily to work on the show, and
Mhm.
motherhood over here has been a little crazy. So
Right.
been just doing motherhood and that, but I'm going to use clips from the YouTube show, I think, for the Instagram in the future so I can get more done in the day because I can only put so many hours into this. It's,
Yeah.
a passion project right now. But what you were asking about helping other people, I mean, I actually often will give people, like, I don't charge people sometimes for a little freebie. Like if somebody is like really struggling with something or they want like a card pulled, I'm like, yeah, sure, let me quickly, like, I'll bust out my deck and I'll flip a card and I'll just, it takes me 10 minutes to tell them whatever maybe they need to hear,
Mhm.
because I really am on a mission to help people. I really want to help people, and
Cool.
I want happiness. I want people to feel happy.
That's where I think at the beginning when we first started talking, you were saying things and I was like, it's exactly how I feel. This is exactly why Soul Inspired was created. This is exactly what I'm doing. It's one of the most joyful types of work because I don't know where we're going to be in humankind in 1,000 years, but I feel like we're going to get to a point where um, I don't want to say it's like a bartering system,
Mhm.
but I don't think that the value of money and all these things are going to be the same. I feel like everyone's going to have their place and the thing they do to help fellow man, fellow woman, fellow
Mhm.
humankind. That's
Mhm.
really, I think, where we're going.
Mhm.
And everyone just takes care of each other. That's, and I said this for years, and probably some people look at me and think, "Oh, Joe, you're such an
So sweet.
optimist. It's so sweet. It's such a cute storyline that everyone just takes care of one another, right?" But I do get upset when I look at the way the world is, and I see how there's just unjust and unfairness all around. And I know that part of it might be part of our existence and part of our growing,
Mhm.
but we also grow. So who's to say my vision is wrong, right?
Mhm.
That at some point everyone's just taking care of one another. And I say it like that because the way you just said it, you said just putting the cards out and you're just kind of doing God's work in a way. And same with if you're starting a show and you're having conversations with people, people can tune in and that you could say one thing out of the hour or 2 hours or half hour or 20 minutes, whatever it is that your length of your show is, but it could impact somebody in such a great, like in so much great detail, right? So basically right now you're concentrating on the show. It's is it just on YouTube or is it also going to be just a
It's
podcast all around?
yeah, it's gonna be YouTube and a podcast.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. And it'll be around soulful conversations as well, like ours.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be people's stories of tragedy,
Hmm.
really. I mean, some of it won't be as tragic, but it's gonna be essentially people's most difficult, darkest days, and then them sharing how they got through it, because I think that's one of the biggest problems we face in society right now is when we get down, and we stay down,
Mm,
and people don't know how to get out of it. And so I want to share like a vast array of problems and share how they got through it, because there will always be somebody to relate to it. So every guest I have is not going to be for everybody, right? Like me as your guest today, I'm not for everybody. Not everybody's going to want to listen to me. They're going to be like, is this girl done talking yet? Like I won't be for everybody.
yeah. But that's the beautiful thing about having a podcast is you get so many different energies and so many different people relate. It's the same thing when I get a comment that I'm not really pleased with. I'm like, hey, why did they take the time to even put the comment on? If it's not the right fit,
Yeah.
just move on. So usually I just remove the comment and move on with my day. But but then but then for that one person, there's 20 people that were like, wow, like I love that. They might
Mhm.
not always put in the comments, but when I do, I really appreciate the positive comments. And I'm sure that you'll get some positive feedback, especially with everything you've gone through. It's saying you're interesting because you had these experiences, you flatline and everything. And you know, you didn't come back with the question in your head, what happened? Did I die? Is there something after this life? Or did you like none of that came to you? You just kind of were like, hey, moving on, like gonna try to survive now. Or is that kind of where you were at?
I came back and felt like I needed to have more appreciation for life,
Mm,
because I felt like I had spent so much time feeling so depressed and not wanting to be here. And so then it was like, oh my gosh, like I need to start having a little more gratitude for life itself. Like I was just given another chance, and I need to figure out why I was given this chance again. And like I said, the whole vision piece was a big thing of it too. Like to really understand and really, really put myself in other people's shoes.
mm,
Like that is something I have always done is even as a little kid, I remember inviting like anybody and everybody to my birthday, and my mom would be like, this is too many kids, or like, you don't even hang out with that girl. And I was like, yeah, but like she doesn't have any friends. I want to invite her. And because
nice.
because I always was thinking about what would it feel like if I was them? What would it feel like? And so I think when I died and went through that experience, it was coming back, it was like, why did that just happen? What am I meant to do on this earth?
Mm,
And almost like, how dare me spend all that time wishing to not be here,
mhm.
because holy moly, like it can be gone so fast.
Wow. It just interests me that somewhat like you can come back and have that thought and experience, which actually is probably sometimes better than to have had this like heavenly experience and saw your great 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 grandfather and all these things, which is great, which is really amazing when that happens. But then when those people come back, a lot of times they're like, why am I here? That was amazing. I miss that. I don't want to be here. And this happens all the time. So many
Yeah.
have said that to me. And then you're coming back here without the memory. You're like,
Mhm,
wow, I need to really appreciate this. And
mhm,
that's the message you're putting out there, right? In that
mhm,
life is fragile. It's pretty quick. We're just here for a quick trip.
mhm.
Do you believe, do you feel, how do I phrase this with you? Do you believe and feel that we do go on after we pass?
Yes, I'm trying. In what way, in what way exactly? I mean, so
So the
yes,
so the Andrea that's in, not the physical Andrea, the Andrea that's Andrea,
yeah, the soul,
the soul.
the
Yeah, what
soul.
where do you believe, where do you go?
Where do you go? You're still here. You're here, you're there, you're everywhere.
Okay.
But I believe, so I have another story about that, but I I believe we are born with a mission to, but everybody's got a different belief on this. And I know I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, that's crazy. I don't believe in that." But I do. I believe we live our life with the purpose of evolving and working through every I don't know if you want to say karmic thing, but I believe we have all these little things that we have to work through so that we can end life and get to the other side and live blissfully because we have figured out everything and we have wrong or we have made all our wrongs right.
Mm,
Like I believe that is part of our life journey. And when we don't learn from our mistakes, we're going to come back and we're going to go through them again until we figure it out. Um, I can say it's the weirdest feeling, but when my grandfather passed, his his body was he was still alive. He still had a heartbeat. He was still breathing. And I remember telling my dad, I said, "You could go see him right now, but I don't think he's here anymore."
mm,
You could just feel that that was only a shell. You could just feel that it was just a body in the room and the soul was no longer there.
mm,
And then, like I said, after that, he was yapping it up in my ear, and I was like, "Go away, this is making me crazy."
mm.
But I very much believe in the body just being a body, which is a whole nother thing that like trips me out sometimes when I like remove myself, like my brain from my body and like think about this is just like what? This is just some hair and some skin, and it's just like this little carcass here. I don't know.
I know. It's kind
It's
I know.
nothing.
I
It's not.
know.
It's all
I
in
know.
here. Like it's not even. It's like there's
Yeah.
just this whole ball of energy that is everything, really. And
Hmm.
people look at the exterior, and yeah, that's so much to them, but it means nothing. Like
Hmm.
I don't even.
It's like getting into a vehicle, and we all have different shapes, different sizes, different, but but here's the thing that we're all have in common. We're all cars. Like that's the way I'm looking at it. Everything's a vehicle. And you get into your car and you use your car and you drive it. And then one day your car breaks down, your car's done, and you get back out of your car. And that's what we do, I think. We leave the body. And I can completely relate to what you said. When my grandmother was passing, I did speak to her when she was in a feverish kind of mess and she was at the end. I I tend to believe that she was there and back. I feel like they're kind of jumping in and out, but they're not all there. You're right. There's this feeling of what are you doing? Why are you holding on or whatever's going on with the body at the time?
Mhm,
Because so many times, how many times have you heard when people say, I was waiting, I was sitting there right by their bedside, and I just thought, okay, I just need to go get a drink of water, or I just need to go down the hall to talk to the nurse because I've been kind of bored here and they leave the room and they come back and they're gone. You go,
mhm,
why? Why did they wait till you left? Because they're in and out, and they wanted to leave on their own. They came in alone, they're leaving alone. And
mhm,
who's making that decision, right? They're making
mhm.
that decision, but sometimes they're not even there. Like in
Yeah.
all intents and purposes, their brains are gone, everything's gone, but there's still a decision being made. So it gets really, and I haven't done a lot of bedside things. It's just my grandmother, but I definitely felt that. So I can
Mhm,
kind of understand where you're coming from when you said you didn't even feel like they were there. So
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. It's very different though, like the cognitive mind and the soul.
Hmm.
Like that there's that thought in their own brain maybe of like, do I go now? Do I go later? But the soul just knows when it's time.
Right. Right. And that's why you said like sometimes maybe the soul's already left and the
Mhm.
body's just kind of hanging
Yeah.
on. And it does sound morbid. I know what you mean. It's the same thing when you said, what am I, just this hair and the skin and
I can
you
just
know what
yeah.
we yeah, we create it for and then there's people who believe that we created the way we were going to look before we came here and this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to experience this life. I had one girl on And she was pretty, and she's like, I've been ugly in past lives. I've had and she had actually, and it was just kind of funny. I laughed the way she said it because I'm like,
Oh
what is ugly? Like it's just I mean, depending on when you're born and which century you're in, what looks good now doesn't look good back then, and what looks, it's just what our
yeah,
minds think looks good, right? And we get so fixated on that stuff, and it's really what's inside.
that's
But
so funny.
yeah, it's just funny. It was just a funny comment, but that's amazing. You kind of touched on the answer of because the last question I always ask is why do we incarnate? But you kind of went there because you said
Mhm,
we have karmic work to overcome. We come here
mhm.
to work on our karmic work until we feel like we've gone through it, and then we decide to go. Is
Yeah.
that kind of and then you say, well, then people you don't want people to think, oh, if I work through all my problems, I'm walking dead, man. Like you don't want to, because some people want to stay here and enjoy life, and but you believe that we're here to kind of work through the challenges of the karma that we've kind of wanted to come and work through. Is that the main reason why you think we come here?
Yeah, I think that when we get to the other side, we don't get to stay there unless we've worked through all the things. So
Mhm.
I think if you want to stay on the other side, then yeah, you better work on all your things. But I mean, it's a choice we have, right? And so, I mean, it's not the nicest of me sometimes, but sometimes when people are really nasty, I'm like, you'll be repeating this lifetime. Like,
I I can't say I haven't thought it before as well. It kind of like see, my personality type is I'll think that and then think, oh, I shouldn't have thought that. It's like I shouldn't think that way, but it's true because um we're here to keep learning. And it's probably why I've said this even when I was a little kid, I'd look around and see kids being mean to each other and I'd be so upset about it. I'd be like, why are you doing that?
Mhm.
So I think personally, I've been here quite a few times and
Yeah.
I've probably seen it so many times and I'm going, ah, don't do that. Because when you're a kid, why would I be thinking of that so young? Why was I wasn't even taught those values yet. I was very young. I mean, maybe I was taught some of them. I would like to give my mom, my grandmother credit and people that were in my life. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do believe that I'm very much in alignment with what you're saying. So
But yeah, like you're saying, like you knew and you had that perspective more than likely from a past life. Like, and that was the whole reason you came into this life was to deal with that, but you're able to deal with it now because you have those emotions and those feelings in that situation. But you
mhm,
wouldn't have those emotions and those feelings in the situations if you hadn't already been through it in another lifetime.
mhm. Yeah,
Especially as a kid, right? Like as a
right.
kid, how do you have such a deep perspective and all that? It comes
Mhm.
from somewhere else, and it comes from, in my opinion, it comes from a past life, a past experience.
Yeah. And
You
it
brought you brought it with you.
and that thinking can also give you more awareness of who we are. It can allow for more forgiveness of other people. When you
Mhm.
see other people doing really stupid ass things, you can think, they're a young soul. They're just starting, they're on their first round trip. And
Yeah,
like, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes that kind of
well,
allows me to
you're
be
new
like,
here.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, wow, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on tonight and talking. It's been
Of
really
course,
nice.
thanks
I'm
for having me.
looking forward to seeing more of the of your podcast that you're going to be
Me
creating
too.
at some point. Yeah. So it's kind of a newer thing that you're getting involved with, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I've really loved having you on. I always talk to the audience and say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired so we can get amazing guests like Andrea on. And but I do appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my gosh, I just looked up and I was like, was record even on? I thought you weren't recording, but we are.
Oh, it's on. It's on. It's on. Yeah.
I was like, oh my
That
God, can you imagine?